right, a little bit late. Sorry about that. I'd like to call to order the June 18th, 2025 A.P.C.H.A Board of Director meeting. The first item on the agenda is roll call.
Okay. Christine? Here. John Ward?
Present.
Carson?
Here.
John Doyle?
Here.
Scott?
Here.
Kelly?
I'm here, and I'm so sorry I'm not there in person again.
You got a cold?
Is
I don't know. My voice is a little scratchy, but I feel fine. I just, I'm running around with kids, and camps end at 3:00, which is so not conducive to the working world. But
No,
here
it's
we are.
not. All right, so keep going.
Because I don't think Peter's there either.
I don't see Peter.
Okay. And I know Francie's not. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is any amendments? Do we have any amendments to the agenda for tonight? I'm looking at you, Matthew. I don't have any. Okay. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Do we have anybody from the public or online that would wish to comment? So this is all we've got right here, right today, right? It looks like nobody's online. Nobody's in the.
I think so.
Nobody's in the audience. So we'll move on from public comment, and we'll go to A.P.C.H.A Board of Directors comments. I'm going to start. I'll start with Kelly online.
I guess we'll briefly comment on a few things going on in the housing space. There's a lot of attention on mobile home parks right now, as you all know, and Pitkin County is contributing $3 million to help buy down the purchase of the Aspen, A.P.C.H.A, and Carbondale mobile home parks that are being sold in a package. And I will take this opportunity to thank the city that I know is also matched and made the same commitment of contribution. The goal is to raise $20 million for the total buy down of that $42 million cost that the offer has been made at for those two parks. And so I will just take this opportunity to, invite the community, invite the private sector to help with those contributions and consider, also dedicating some funds to helping with that buy down. Because I think we've raised maybe over 10 million at this point, which still leaves a huge gap in order to retain affordability for those. And even though they're outside of Pitkin County, many of the people who live in those parks work up here. And may otherwise qualify for A.P.C.H.A eligibility and A.P.C.H.A units. So thinking about the whole inventory is important. We're also continuing down the path on the Phillips Mobile Home Park project that Pitkin County owns. You may have read a little bit of an article in the paper today about our discussion. The challenge of mobile home parks is infrastructure, and this is universal, it seems, across mobile home parks. And so that's no different at Phillips. And we are looking at a price tag of $15 million to replace the water plant, the sewer plant, and to improve the roads and then create new roads so that we can add more density on that site. And we are engaging in conversations with community partners who might want to build the new units on that site. And so just thought I would give a few updates along those lines. And, there will be more articles, more conversation about these topics, I think, coming up. And it is a challenge, and capital maintenance remains a challenge. And I look forward to learning more about where we're at with our capital maintenance study and contemplating and anticipating further discussions along those lines as well. Thank you.
So, and those mobile home parks,
Yeah.
I think they've got, I was kind of trying to do in my head, because there's been a couple articles in the paper. Basalt's kicked in some money. Glenwood Springs has kicked in some, or Garfield County, I think, has kicked in some money for the one in Garfield County. Thistle has a pretty good, I think, program that they've offered each one of those mobile home parks. It is a buy down to get to a certain spot. I've done some math with both parks to get to, my goal was always to get to where they've been paying their pad side rents today, to keep it kind of the same. Sounds like they've got to be getting pretty close. That's the accounting you kind of mentioned, some dollar figure that they've gotten to so far raised, and that's the kind of their down payment to me to get to a certain spot. Have you talked to Thistle? Have you gotten any?
Yeah, I mean, Thistle provides an excellent model, and their ability, I think, to work with the residents and to raise the loan from what's called Rock Capital is their fund lending partner, really does require them to buy down the purchase price. So if Thistle would not be able to participate in this if the $42 million price tag remains where it's at. Their ability to engage, requires a significant buy down, which is why the $20 million is the target, is really based on their input on the lending terms that they can bring to the table, paired with their requirements for maintaining affordability and planning that affordability out over decades.
Sure.
So that's sort of been where the Thistle partnership sometimes has fallen apart at other parks in the past, is just either the state of the infrastructure, means that the residents won't be able to keep their rents low enough over 30 years to merit their involvement, or just the price overall. And then thirdly, kind of the size. So Thistle doesn't tend to engage in mobile home parks that are, I think it's 20 units or fewer. They tend to work on bigger, parks that are sized with 20 units and above.
Both of these parks
So those are some of three of the considerations that they make when they decide to engage with a community.
Well, both of these parks are big enough for that, right? They're about 70 in one, and and Thistle, I talked to the director, is a bit ambiguous as far as what their requirements were going to be. The product they put together felt like a pretty good product for them. Do they make them do a capital reserve study or anything on these parks before they go into it, or how do they figure out?
They will as part of their own due diligence between the offer and closing.
Okay. Interesting. Well, they've got some real traction, so hopefully they get her done.
Yes, and any partnership that those of you in the private sector want to bring to this, we're trying to create lending or donation opportunities, for the private sector. We're trying to set up a system where private donations can get run through for tax deductions as well. And so, all of that is in the works, and we'd love to raise the 20 million.
Very cool. And is that split between both parks then, or how's that going to work? I mean, purchase prices are quite a bit different between both parks as well.
Yeah, one of the terms of the offer that is on the table that the residents have to match is both parks being bought as a package. So there is not the opportunity to separate them out. There has been different price tags assigned to the two different parks. So the Carbondale Park, I think, is at, I'm going to get this wrong, but near 16 million. And then the Aspen Basalt Park
22.
in the Basalt area is higher than that.
Yeah.
And so, and part of that is because the park in Carbondale already has a deed restriction on it that requires it remain a mobile home park. So that reduced the value on that park. But they're being offered as a package. The offer on the table is to buy them as a package. And so the offer that Thistle has to make on behalf of the residents is as a package for both.
Okay, interesting. Cool. Well, thanks, Kelly. Peter, good to see you. How are you? Board member comments.
I'm good, thank you. Sorry to be late there.
Doing director's comments and I
Or-
sucked
yeah.
up a lot of air.
No, that's great. I just had a few questions. Thank you. Just on the capital reserve study, I know Liz provided an update at our April 16th meeting. And I saw that it got moved to a discussion in August that Matthew updated me on. And I just wondered if the study is available, if it can be released and we can review a copy of it. Also, would love to get an update on the affidavits that went out and how those are coming in and what the response is based on the requirement for more information. And then would love more information if staff can share on the school district housing story that was in the paper. I had quite a few people ask me about it, and I'm not up to speed. And if there's more information that can be shared, I'd love to be
Probably
educated
on
on
the
it.
school district thing, that's probably a legal issue. Probably can't comment much more than what was in the paper, my guess is. Is that true?
Yes, that is correct.
Affidavits, I do have a question about that too, because I tried to do mine and my email, whatever, it doesn't allow me to log in. I never got an email reset. Is there some website issues or what's going on with that?
I think most people, it's been pretty clear. We've had a few people with that, and they're either welcome to come in or talk to Maddie, and we'll figure out another way. But it's been generally going very smoothly. Yeah. So, and Emily, do you have a percentage right now? Sorry, I should have asked you earlier.
That's okay.
It's generally been going very smoothly.
I talked to Anka a little bit about it yesterday, actually, and she's going through because there's been quite a few duplicates. So her task right now is to go through and consolidate those duplicates so that there's one entry for each person. So she said the number of affidavits that we've received is total like much higher, but once she's reduced because of all those duplicates, her guess was that we've gotten about 800 or 900 of them back out of the 1,600 or so units in the ownership. So
And we're
still
doing-
hoping for more.
And we're doing another PR blast next week to remind people.
How does that, and I should know this probably, but how does it work for households? Like my wife and I live in the same house and I've got one email address and she's got another.
Yeah, so I think what happened is you would have each gotten the email asking you to do it, but only one of you needs to complete it as long as you're putting your wife's name on it as the second owner.
I can't count on her to do that for me, but sorry, don't let her hear me say that.
This is a public meeting.
But Anka has been walking people through if they've been having trouble too, and some people have been coming in and Karen's helped them, and then some people have had an easy time of it. So.
Okay. And then capital reserves, is it just delayed report? What's the story with that? Why we pushed it to August?
Liz.
Okay, I think this is on. Yeah, so we did move the conversation on capital reserves to August. We received a final report from the consultants. We're still just reviewing it, asking questions, and giving some feedback on it. And part of the reason why we moved it to August was to just give some more time to prepare like a more thought out presentation. So not just the results, but maybe some of the ways we're going to move forward with them as well. So looking at some of those different ideas for solutions. And also we started working with the county more on this as well. We got Andrew here. And so we really wanted to make sure we were taking the proper time to include their feedback in it too, and then take it to the A.P.C.H.A board. And not sure if that's what you were thinking for reports, but otherwise, Peter, otherwise we do have for specific HOAs, but weren't looking to make those public.
So the broad report will be part of the packet.
Yeah.
Next
There'll be
board meeting, but we weren't planning on releasing the individual numbers for each individual HOA.
Yeah, there'll be an aggregate report.
When we do that, can we, I would like to see the individual HOAs. You can take the names off and you can have it HOA, A, B, C, D. But I think it would be helpful just to have.
Why are we protecting the innocent
Well, I don't think that we need to.
or the guilty, so to speak?
Yeah, I think we need to see the individual.
Maybe we could do some kind of plot that shows the different deficits an HOA. And the reason we just didn't want to up front put the name by each was because in the original outreach process, we had sort of made it clear like this wasn't like a public shaming effort. And there are like impacts too on like lending and when people are buying their home as well.
But all that get disclosed, that's not right. I don't need to see the names of the HOAs, but I do want to see individual HOA, how many units it is, what, where they are as a percentage of their, reserves. I don't want to just see aggregate data. I want to see individual, because I think it's material.
Yeah, I think we could probably do some like plots to show the different numbers of everyone who participated, and it's not just like line by line the name of the HOA.
But
and all their numbers,
I want to see HOAA is 45% reserved on their against their expected capital needs, and then their HOA dues are they're this much, and of that this much is going to reserve. I would like to see that, and I think that's helpful in the conversation, because it's then it's sort of from there then we can figure out how do you encourage or help those HOAs to get to a healthy level. And I think if you can't see that level of detail, again, I don't need to see the names, but John, I think you bring a good point. It is what it is. It's not as if
We're doing inspections on every unit we sell. Do those inspections go into HOA evaluation at all?
They will. So the inspection on the individual unit that happens before it sells, the inspector, from what I've seen, I've been looking at them a lot lately, is he'll call out and say, the roof is X number of years old, roofs typically last this number of years, consider contacting the HOA about a plan for replacement. So there are some high level things in those individual inspection reports that call out like this might be an item that you should contact the HOA about.
Well, and I think that we need to have, as part of our requirements, is A.P.C.H.A should require, in order to sell a property, A.P.C.H.A should require the HOA to have a capital reserve study done within, pick how long you want it done, 5-10 years. But I'm sure there are HOAs out there that are not even doing them, that didn't participate, that aren't doing them, that have no idea what their problem is. And
Wasn't there state law that's changed that's made some of this codified in law? That don't we have some worry there with HOAs too?
The biggest issue is you have a lot of owners who would like to do the right thing, but they don't have enough of a vote. They don't have enough people to raise their dues so that they can actually start doing this. And that's what we have in some of these HOAs.
But there's state law that's going to require, yeah.
You can complain to I think it's either Colorado Real Estate, but they have nobody to do any type of enforcement. Because we have people who want to complain about their HOA, and what we keep finding out is they have a department that you can call and you can complain about, but they have no enforcement right to come and do anything. So there's a disconnect there.
And it is also in the A.P.C.H.A regulations that new properties are required to have capital reserve studies as well, but it only impacts properties that have been built since that regulation was implemented. So all the newer properties like Burlingame 3 have capital
South
reserve
Aspen
studies.
has one.
Yeah.
There's not a lot that were required. We put that in our regulations. I can't remember
So
what
what
year,
do
but
we,
most
I mean,
most
to me,
were
what do we
already
do
built.
here? At some point, do we wait until the roof falls in, walls fall down, and then change the deed restriction
So
and give assistance, and then now they've got to have a different level of assessment?
I think what you were talking about, so under it's the CC, Colorado Common Interest Ownership
Kiowa.
Kiowa Act. So what I think you were talking about there is board members have a fiduciary duty to manage the association. And what that I think added is that if a board or a board member, knowingly, violates that fiduciary duty, there is potentially the ability to hold people personally liable. So meaning that if an owner or a group of owners say, hey, we're not managing the finances of the association correctly, and people can, move forward knowing that they're not, maintaining that fiduciary duty, there could be personal liability. That's what I've heard, and I know a couple of associations that have used that to drive change within their association.
So refusing to do a capital reserve study, in theory, is keeping your head in the sand and not knowingly. I mean, that would be their defense, wouldn't it? I didn't know.
I'm not an
We
attorney.
didn't do a study. So,
This is one of the things that we eventually, when we really start going through all this, is an idea that if there comes a point where the city or the county or whatever helps provide funds for this, the only way it will be done is if they do a capital reserve study, if they abide by it, and they actually have capital reserve funds to start getting back up again. So we're still talking about what are the plans now going forward with this that we will bring back to the board for discussion.
okay. Peter, anything else? You're on mute, Boomer.
Sorry, the housing needs study that was done for state purposes, what's the status of that report?
So the housing needs assessment being done by the city right now, and we're working with Pitkin County and Town of Snowmass Village and going all the way through Garfield County. Right now, we're hoping to finish the first phase of that by the beginning of July, I believe. And it's split into two phases for a couple reasons, but and I think I talked about it last time as well. But so Snowmass Village and Aspen, we're trying to apply for AMI waivers for Proposition 123, the State Affordable Housing Fund. And so we have to have this housing needs assessment to back what AMIs we serve. So that's why we have this first phase to cover that. And it's going to be very limited tables that are more like, here's need by AMI based on these numbers. And then the rest of that housing needs assessment, that's going to include all the requirements by Senate Bill 174. That will be done in January.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Peter. We'll go over here. John?
Just a bit of news from a different valley. I was over in Edwards today for a Northwest COG Water Quality and Quantity Conference, and on the front page of the Vail Daily, Vail's undertaking their largest capital project ever, 265 units of employee housing. And I thought, wow, that sounds very familiar. Anyway, sounds like it's as big an issue there as it is here, of course.
Carson?
I don't really have any comments. The only thing I noticed was that we've gone to one meeting a month. I don't know if I missed that discussion.
We discussed that at the end of last year. I mean, if the board wants to, we had a discussion. I did a memo on the burdens on staff. If the board wants to have a special meetings or different, we can absolutely have that discussion.
I don't know if I thought we resisted doing that. I thought we tried to be efficient with our meetings.
Yeah.
but I don't think we
I mean,
ultimately
all
said we
year
were
we've
gonna
been
do one
doing
meeting a month.
about one a month, but if, and then
Well, some
traditionally.
of it's been county,
Yeah.
city meetings conflicting, and so we've
And
pushed them, but
I mean, I guess my only thought is, I mean, so we've been, we started off the year talking about, and I understand it's a once in a 5 year, the strategic
Yeah.
plan. But now July is, talking about the work plan, and August is talking about the work plan. And I mean, to me, it feels like we're doing a lot of talking about what we're going to do, and we're not actually doing anything.
well, that's not true. We've made some changes in the last.
I don't know. It just, it's slow going, and when we have the meetings, it goes even slower. So that's my comments.
What do you mean by slow going?
Well, I mean,
goes
if you
even
have
slower?
half as many meetings, you get
Oh.
half as much
You said half
accomplished.
the meetings. I thought you said half the
Half.
meetings.
HALVE.
Okay. Well, I mean, we should think about it for
Okay.
sure,
Absolutely.
and use all of our time
I
efficiently.
don't know that it
to do
needs to
stuff.
be 24 meetings a year, but I also don't know that it needs to be 12.
Christine,
I don't have anything. Thank you.
and I have no comment tonight either.
Peter Wynn?
We already got Pete.
Sorry, can I ask one more thing?
Oh,
I
you had your hand
know.
up. Go ahead, Peter.
City council recently had on their agenda, maybe it was even Monday, I've lost track, or Tuesday, the right sizing program. And I was wondering if we can get an update on what council's position was or update was on that.
Yeah, we can. That, I think our direction was to bring it to the A.P.C.H.A board. So I was going to mention that, but there's probably not a
Mike.
Oh. Our recommendation was to bring some of those ideas to the A.P.C.H.A board. So they'll be coming our way. I'm not sure in which meeting. Liz.
I just wanted to say, I just talked to Emily about this, and we scheduled it for the July A.P.C.H.A board meeting to bring that to you all.
Cool. And just to add to that, it was to continue looking into it, not to discontinue it.
But we'll get a chance to weigh in.
I feel like we're talking in code here.
It
So,
was moving assistant. It was pretty open in the meeting.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't see the city council meeting. I didn't
Yeah.
see anything. in
Oh,
paper.
There were-
it was just a work session.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. There were several ideas about right sizing incentives, moving assistance program.
Mhm.
And I think those were the two big ones.
I think-
And then
yeah.
we'll come to this board for feedback and additional ideas.
Thank you. And I have no comment. Executive director's comments, staff update.
Good afternoon, everyone. Matthew Gillen, Executive Director. We had Molly Foley Healy up here in May for a very successful meeting. We had the fire department there as well, which was great. And we're doing that again on July 8th. And we're hoping to get her up here again after that later on in the year. We'll be at the farmers market on August 9th, and I'll send the board out a reminder closer to the time. We'd love some board members to stop by for that.
August 9th, you said?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Saturday.
Sorry, when is that, Matthew?
August 9th, and I'll send a calendar invite to everybody. As Liz and Emily mentioned, yeah, we are deepening our coordination specifically with the county. So the Brain Trust over there of Andrew, Liz, and Emily are meeting, I think, every 2 weeks. And we met right before I went on vacation. We all got together with the city and the county and A.P.C.H.A. So we're really working on deepening that relationship now that the county has dedicated funds. The McIntyre lawsuit, that's the final court order is delayed until early July due to their appeal for more time. So I just want to update you on that. Tom went into some detail in executive session at the last meeting. Tom Snyder, the new hearing officer, had his first hearing, and it looks as if that will not be appealed to the board, but he is up and running, which was great, and it went very smoothly, and we got the write-up very quickly, so that's going very well.
Excellent.
And
Where do his decisions end up?
funny.
I just like to do, is there a chance to review?
Yeah,
his
it's all public.
decisions?
It's
Where does it sit?
I'll check on that for you. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure it was up on the web. The hearing's public, but I'll just check on where the actual decision goes.
Okay.
I'll check on that for
Because the
you.
hearings are definitely.
Yeah,
public.
the hearings are broadcast.
Must see TV.
They're on Zoom meetings,
Yeah.
or,
Some of it.
yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Okay, and the one thing we did have a request from a member of the public to the A.P.C.H.A board, and she will be here at the next boarding meeting, but I just wanted to flag it for you. So there was a series of emails from Jenna Moe back in May. A.P.C.H.A staff met with her on what she can achieve under current regulations based on, she wants to add a bedroom to her 3-bedroom Burlingame unit, which she's allowed to do. So we went through and we talked with Tom, and it's fairly simple for A.P.C.H.A to change the classification from 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom. She doesn't, the category won't change, but she'll get credit for going up a bedroom because there is specific language in the building, the original building, to give expansion. So that's great, and we went through that with her, but then she specifically asks to the board, and I'm asking the board if they would like us to explore that. Is there a precedent? Would the board like to explore precedent for adjusting the max sales price for self-funded expansions? Because right now she would only get the regular 10% capital gain, capital increase on that, which would depreciate down. So if she's adding a bedroom, which would be several $100,000, she would not be able to recoup that under the current regulations. So she said she'll come here to the next board meeting. She can give more details, but I just wanted to mention that because she did specifically ask the board, and then in our conversation we had with her in late May, I said, okay, I will mention that to the board as well. So the question is, if somebody actually expands their house, does the board want us to explore a way for that to be folded into the max sales price? Because right now, the current model, it's really based around improving, the size, the home as it is, not making it bigger. So I don't need an answer right now, but I just wanted to get that out there and just food for thought. I said I told her I'd mention it to you guys, and she said she'd come in August, and it's not a. She said it. She wants
She's
to get
getting
it
a
done
bump
promptly,
with
but
the
it's not
fourth
urgent.
bedroom, right?
Yeah, so she'd be going from 3-bedroom to 4-bedroom, and that would be
And that doesn't
several
pick
hundred.
up the cost?
No, it'd be. She
It's-
doesn't think so.
I think the difference in the two, I mean, it's not a lot of money.
No.
I mean, it's
No.
like, I think the difference, I don't know, but I think, and full disclosure, Jen is my neighbor.
Yeah.
But I think the difference between a 3 and a 4-bedroom, it was
It's not much.
$10,000 or $20,000 or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not a material amount. And I know that on that property, it was Burlingame 1. The zoning approval was done at, when they built those, but they just didn't do it. So they gave them approval to do it, but they didn't actually do it. And so the expense is considerable.
So just think about that for a little bit, and we can talk about it at the next meeting when she's here, and I can get some direction from you guys if that's something you'd like us to explore or not.
Something that might be helpful for that is how many properties this could potentially affect.
It's not, well, based in the Burlingame right now, it's I think 12,
Okay.
but then you would be also opening, if there's a single family home that wants to do an addition, is that something that you'd want to be covered as well? So there's things down the line as well. But if I remember correctly, the Burlingame people who have this ability, I think it's just 12 units. And that's all I have right now.
Notifications, rental units, sale units.
right now, we have, for some reason, a lot of units that are gonna be coming up for sale over the next month. We're probably gonna have anywhere between 3 to 4 to possibly 5 coming up almost every single week. So again, make sure you sign up for notifications if you're in the market to purchase. We are also gonna be listing an RO North 40 within the next week or two as well. The household has tried to sell it themselves, and they are now decided to list it with us. But it is something that's going to be over 2 million. So just sign up for notifications, and we do have right now a lot of units available, a lot of rental units available at Aspen Country Inn. We as a staff are trying to talk over what we can bring back to the board for some ideas that will help us maybe fill these units. The issue is the income is very low, and it's because it's low income housing tax credit. We have to abide by that. We don't have any leeway in that at all, and there are specific requirements that we have to follow when we qualify people. We have a couple of ideas that we plan on bringing forward to you. And hopefully that will be also at the next meeting in July. We need to, as staff, really get those down as to what we think makes sense.
So do you have any idea? I mean, like just our general sense. You said there's 4 or 5 a week coming up
For ownership.
For ownership.
Some people are moving out of the valley. Some people they won another lottery, and so that unit is coming up. We do have a couple, they're older units, they're down in Hoagland Ranch, and so it's just people, they're either moving in with somebody, they're leaving the valley, or that's what a lot of that is. We do, again, ask for that information. I'll see if we can pull some of that information. We don't require people to give that. Most people will tell us a little bit about why, but not everybody will answer that question for us.
Interesting. Thanks.
Thank you, Cindy. Next item on the agenda is the consent calendar, and we have the minutes of the May 7th meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Do I have a second? Did I talk over you? Just second.
Second.
Carson seconds. Do we have a discussion? No discussion. All those in favor?
I have to
roll call vote.
Okay. Kelly?
I'm going to abstain because I was on vacation.
Okay. Carson?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And Scott?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The next item on the agenda is first reading of resolution number 3, Series 2025, adopting amendments to the Aspen-Pitkin County housing regulations at first reading and scheduled for public hearing on July 16th, 2025.
And this is something that the board did talk about last year, and they approved it last year. We did put it in our regulations to bring back when we did this whole update that we did over the last month. It got missed in that memo. So we're bringing back to the board to make sure, so it's formally adopted. What this does is it follows along with and Bethany's online, so if I mess up, she'll intervene and clear it up. This is something that we're following the IRS guidelines on what they determine as a dependent, where it is once the baby is born and they have a birth certificate, then that child is classified as a dependent, and not once somebody is pregnant. So it's that we're trying to be in line with the IRS definition of how you define a dependent.
And this was a weird, when people were requesting to qualify for housing based upon, hey, I'm trying to get pregnant, I'm doing IVF,
Mm-hmm.
or hey, I'm pregnant, baby's due in 9 months or 8 months, I should qualify for a 3-bedroom unit, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you used to find out who was pregnant.
Right. Plus one.
And so you can't take the tax deduction until the baby's born, right?
Mhm. Right.
Okay. Is Bethany, you said she's on.
Is she there?
No, Cindy presented that correctly. This also brings it in line with the A.P.C.H.A regulations on adoption, and just the idea that you can't count a adopted child until they've formally or legally been adopted. You can't say, I'm going to adopt in the future, so I should qualify. So this brings it perfectly in line with those. And as Cindy mentioned, following the IRS's definition of a dependent is a lot more straightforward for A.P.C.H.A.
Pretty easy to
Mhm.
adjudicate.
Yeah.
I'm not a tax lawyer, but when you're divorced, doesn't only one parent get to claim a dependent?
We have specific regulations with regards to when somebody's divorced. It is listed in the guidelines or in the regulations as to how we deal with that, as to how we can each person claim that child and get its amount of bedrooms, and it is stated in the regulations as to how many bedrooms somebody can really get if they've split up. So it is taken care of with other language that's in our regulations when somebody divorces.
Kelly.
Thanks. I just wondered if there was anything to think about related to disability and qualifications for dependents who are disabled or, sort of legally have received a disability finding. I'm sorry, I'm fumbling with my words here about the
The
legal
IRS
term of
already,
that, but
if you have a dependent, I mean, that would be like a disabled adult that you take care of for perpetuity or whatever. That you have to claim that. You get, there's a deduction there for you, and you go through that process. So that would be
We've had
pretty
people
easy.
who say, I have a dependent, my mother's my dependent. We say, great, is she on your income tax returns? So that is something that if to be classified as that, people can do that. So again, we go by what the IRS does in situations like that as well.
So that kind of makes it black and white.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Well, I'm gonna move to approve at first reading resolution number 3, series 2025, a resolution of the Housing Authority, Pitkin County Housing Authority, Aspen Pitkin County Housing Authority, adopting amendments to the Aspen Pitkin Employee Housing Regulations and schedule the public hearing for July 16th, 2025. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Scott will second.
I'll go ahead and second.
Scott seconds. Discussion? Okay.
I will say, having used this personally, I mean,
Uh-oh.
kick everything out. I mean, I think that if somebody is having a baby, I think it makes sense to allow them to qualify for a larger unit. I think that the challenge that we're seeing is people have tried to use that section of the regulations to shoehorn in, every potential situation that they can, right? If clearly, like, it's taking what was intended to say, if somebody has a growing family, we should be looking at, their housing and allowing their housing to grow with their family. And I think that it sounds to me like it's been abused. And so, is there a way to rewrite it to make it very specific and exclude what's being abused while maintaining the original intent?
I guess that's a question for staff. Is this being abused, or is the effort in changing this language in the regulations an effort towards fixing any sort of abuse? Is there any sort of abuse happening that
Well, I
this is an
think it was
effort in
just
fixing?
to make we had it was just to clarify what a dependent is, and that is a live baby per the IRS regulations. I believe we have had situations in the past years where a pregnancy has not gone to term, and that has been a very awkward situation for staff. And I think in the end, some accommodation was made, and then we have also had situations where couples trying to adopt felt aggrieved that we weren't, until the adoption was final, we didn't have any way to do that. And we've had other situations where people have done IV and you don't know for a little while until it's successful. And so how do you do that? So I think this, based on discussions we had last year with the board, this was just the easiest way to make it clear for everybody what we're looking for. And then that takes responsibility away from staff to adjudicate these very difficult decisions.
Yeah, I think this takes away the hypothetical.
Right.
Yeah. Right. And frankly, there's probably a family that already has a need for an extra bedroom or more space, and they're on the same lottery list that somebody that, hey, I'm pregnant, I'm going to have a baby in 6 months or whatever. Can I get into that lottery?
Right. Yeah.
And the board did talk about this at length last year and did come to a consensus that it made sense. So that's one of the reasons why we're bringing this back.
I'm strongly in favor of it. So
Kelly has hand up.
Kelly, sorry.
You're muted.
She's actually not muted. She's just not, we're not getting any audio from her.
That's not this one.
That's what turned off.
That's what
There we go.
There
There
you go, Kelly.
You're back.
Sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, great. We can hear you guys, and Peter and I can hear each other. So this becomes problematic for like a window of time, generally, right? Like that's where, say a year, someone is endeavoring to grow their family, and then a year later they've grown their family, and this paperwork becomes much more straightforward. I guess I'm wondering, what is the opportunity for, like, there's likely, what happens when you have the lag time between you've had the baby, you're qualifying an A.P.C.H.A with last year's taxes.
Birth
you can
certificate.
request A.P.C.H.A to be able to update your packet to reflect changes in income, family, whatever. Like, how do we allow for that here? If someone's not, do they need to go back and sort of refile? I mean, they can't refile for the prior year when they didn't have the kid, but they're applying in this year where now they have the kid. It's not going to show up on their taxes. Is there some accommodation like for that situation?
Yeah, Kelly, as soon as there is a baby with a birth certificate, that's fine. Doesn't need to be a new packet. We'll accept the birth certificate as soon as there is one. As soon as there's a baby, we're happy.
All right. Do we need to spell, like, does that get spelled out anywhere relative to that just interim period of time of how the dependent gets qualified?
It hasn't been a problem so far, so I don't think we need to worry about it.
And we can add that additional language to it that the household needs to provide a birth certificate, but
I don't think we need to, because we do ask for a birth certificate, Kelly, outside of them appearing on a tax return. We see that often with a divorced couple who only the dependent is claimed on one tax return every other year. So we're very used to asking for the birth certificate to back up the child. So we don't need to add that in any other place.
Satisfied, Kelly? Okay. Further
Sure,
discussion?
yep. Sounds good.
I appreciate the clarity. I think that solves some problems.
So, roll call vote?
okay. Kelly,
Yes, thank you.
Carson,
Yes.
John,
Yes,
Ward,
ma'am.
okay, John Doyle,
Yes.
and Scott.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is proposed changes and future of the grant program. Axberg and Maynard.
Sounds like a law firm.
I was gonna say, is it?
PC.
Something started there.
For the record, Liz Axberg, Housing Policy Analyst with the City of Aspen. And so originally I was administering this program, and since Emily started here, she's been taking the lead on it, and we've been working together, and it's been great to have a thought partner on it. And yeah, we've helped a lot of people through the program, so it'll be great to give an update and some of what we've been learning throughout this program as well, and some of the ideas that have come out of that, and get your feedback and ideas as well.
Getting all these pop-ups.
You can just go to, well, there's a few ways. You can go to slideshow and then,
There we go.
yeah, sometimes I feel like it changes.
Make all the Zoom things go away.
Yeah.
We can't see that parcel.
Okay, hi, Emily Maynard, A.P.C.H.A.'s Housing Policy Analyst, and we're here today to talk about grant program and home repairs and maintenance and things. And I'll just give a shout out to Liz for managing this program, kicking it off and making it what it is now. It's much easier, I think, than it was at the start. So huge shout out to Liz for doing all the heavy lifting, because it's made my job easier. What we'll cover, I was just going to talk a little bit about how the grant program's going this year. We're halfway through the year or so. And then just give you a little bit of overview and data about the essential repairs program, and then talk a little bit about what we want the future of that program to look like, and get your input on that, and see what you think of sort of an expanded grant program that's also aimed at home repairs that I think we're proposing is called like a unit turnover program. And then we'll have a discussion and get your direction on what you think of all those things and how we should move forward. So in 2025, and I'll just preface this with, I pulled these numbers a week and a half ago, so they have all gone up since then because the grants are sort of constantly coming in and repairs are constantly being completed. But we've had 38 plus grants that we've approved this year in 2025, and that's it's now about $255,000 that we've allocated towards those, which is over half of the budgeted $400,000. And a couple more of those repairs have been completed, so those checks have been cut, and there's a pretty big range of repair costs, so from around $1,000 repair to $35,000 repair, and those repairs that are costing that $35,000, those are typically the roof replacements that we've had a couple of. The boilers are some of those expensive, and like boiler system things that have failed, those ones tend to be pretty expensive. And then windows, depending on how many windows people are replacing, but those repairs can also be pretty expensive. the average cost is lower, just over $12,000. And then with that, those matching funds, the actual grants awarded comes out around $6,500 on average. And the most common that we've actually received quite a few for hot water heaters that have gone out this year. And then also quite a few windows and some boilers and some of the boiler hot water heater combination systems as well.
Scott. I'm just looking at the average repair cost and the average grant.
Mm-hmm.
And then the breakdown on the match percentages. Looking at the average repair cost and the average grant awarded and the percentage breakdown for the match, does this mean that we're looking at the average grant being awarded to a Cat 4 or above?
Not necessarily, and I didn't for this presentation pull categories, but I think those grants awarded, right, because of the $10,000 match for the grant,
yeah.
I think that skews the average. So if it's that $35,000 repair, their match kind of doesn't matter because they're going to pay that difference between the $10,000 and the $35,000. So I think that kind of makes it look like they're all Category 4, where in reality we're seeing the full spread from Category 1 to Category 4. And I don't think this year that we've had any of the Category 5. That's that like special category. And we'll talk about, I think, this kind of like a one-off.
Do we have good distribution data on that? Does it look like it's pretty between the categories in terms of the grant program so far?
Yeah, I think it's pretty well distributed between like 1 through 4.
And usually the Category 1 households are retired households on fixed incomes as well, since we don't actually have that many Category 1 units.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So just a reminder of what the program looks like. It's geared towards those Category 1 through 4 owners, and then we made that sort of special exception for the Category 5 owners who are faced with these $20,000 plus emergent repairs, and that came from a Category 5 owner who had, I think last year, a water service line break, and it was a really large repair, and so we issued a grant for that and kind of put this in like we will support those Category 5 owners with this program if they have those like major things going on. But like I said, we don't have many applicants in that category. And then
Peter's got a question here real quick, sorry. Peter?
Oh, sure.
He's not speaking. Peter?
Me?
There he is. Yeah, you had
Sorry.
your hand up.
I apologize. Quick question. Can you just give us big picture again? These are essential repairs, and when a unit turns over and needs work done, is the buyer typically applying for these grants, or are the units already fixed up and they've been in the unit several years and these repairs come up and then they apply for the grant? At what stage are people typically applying for these grants?
So I think there's a spread. There's quite a few buyers. Like for instance, one off the top of my head won the lottery, knew from the inspection report that the water heater needed to be replaced, applied for the grant, and by the time she had closed on the unit, then we could award the grant to her, and she'd already gotten her paperwork in. And then the other one that I was going to bring up is I got an email I wanted to share with you today from a grant recipient, and I wanted to read it to you guys because it's really nice. But this is sort of the opposite end. This is somebody who they've owned their home for a really long amount of time, received a grant, and we're really grateful. So since you brought that up, Peter, I'm just going to read this to you because I think it's nice to highlight what this program means to people. He said, "We received our check. Thank you for your help in this process. Without A.P.C.H.A, we would never have been able to own a home in the town where we have worked for the past 45 years. And this repairs grant program is a great boost in keeping our place intact with great appreciation." So I thought that was nice. So it's a spread of people. There's those new buyers, and then there's people who have owned for a really long time and are making those repairs.
What you're proposing here is a budget for units that are being purchased.
Not yet, but yes.
Okay, sorry.
That's okay.
I won't steal your thunder.
And then, yeah, this current program, we have that require match based off categories. So category 1, their match is 10%, 2, 20%, and so forth. And the essential repairs listed here are what we've been generally approving. We've had recently a couple requests about radon mitigation, which would also fall into the purview of the program. And then I combined the data from last year and this year just to give you a bigger picture, and it lines up pretty well what is going on this year with what we saw last year. But total, both years, we've approved over 80 applications with average repair costs around $13,000 and average grant amount around $7,000. And then I looked back at last year and this year, and I kind of pared the program down into what I thought would be essential only for our discussion about the future of the program going forward. And it changed the numbers a little bit. So it brought that average repair cost down below $10,000 and the average grant $5,500. And it would have brought the totals for 2024 down to $178,000. And that is important because of what we're going to talk about for the program going forward. The past 2 years, it's been considered a pilot program. And so one thing we've talked about is sort of instead of this making a supplemental request for the budget every year, approving this as a ongoing part of the budget. So think about that. The goal is to continue to support those owners with repairs that are necessary to improve the health and safety of the home, protect the integrity of the asset, or bring the unit up to code. And like I said before, the people who are receiving these grants are incredibly grateful to the program. I hear Liz and I hear all the time. They're like huge thanks. They really appreciate the support. So looking at what we think this program should continue to be is limited to category 1 through 4 because we're not really seeing that category 5. We are proposing removing it, I think. And then we're posing the question to you all, do you want to continue to see that required match at the same level that it is now, which is the 10% category 1, 20% category 2? So that's something you can think about. The other thing that I will add with that is these recipients of the grants are taxed on that grant money. So I think for some of them, it does feel a little bit like the funds tend to dwindle once they put their match in and then get taxed on the funds. So just something to think about. And then otherwise, we mostly would propose that the program continue as it has. Would be available to people who need to, complete those essential repairs. Their hot water heater goes out or their boiler. And we think that we could narrow the scope of that a little bit to be those truly essential things, which I listed here. And it's mostly the same, right? Those hot water heaters, the boilers and furnaces, those roof replacements are really expensive. And those people have been incredibly grateful for the help with those costs. Plumbing leaks, we see quite a few of those things, and these ones they tend to be difficult because there's the leak and then there's the consequent damage, which can sometimes be really extensive, and it makes these grants a little bit more difficult, because then you're looking at paying for help of the plumber fixing the leak, and then all the things that come with it, that's maybe mold mitigation, replacing carpets, walls, whatever it may be. So those are some of the more complicated ones. one thought was to say that the grant would support, like just the leak portion and not maybe all the consequent damages, but that's a question for you all, what you think that should be going forward. The thought of removing some of the consequent damages to the unit will help you with the leak, but we're kind of removing that gray area of like what all is this program designed to cover. And then I left radon and other environmental risks like mold in there as health and safety items.
Something like a leak, insurance plays a function in something like that as well.
Yeah, and that is incredibly helpful for those people who have these really, extensive problems from the leaks. Their insurance hopefully will cover a large portion of that. Other ones that are sort of the mold, it's like the extent of the mold is, how much of your bathroom or whatnot is getting ripped out and replaced, and how much of that feels sort of in tune with what the program was designed for, and some of those mold things, it's like, how long has this been going on? Is this an essential thing? So I don't know, I guess maybe a little clarification on what you all might see as essential would help with some of that gray area for us going forwards. And then we did kind of leave in the case-by-case basis for us to continue to use our discretion. And it's great having Liz to be somebody to bounce ideas off of when we get sort of a strange one. The hot water heater's easy, but some of the other ones
sometimes it's like a porch falling apart. So it can be a hazard, but does it fall into the scope? And so what Emily's talked about is it's not that different from the other list, but more at the aim of being like, these are what we have seen as the true essential repairs and people need to immediately address. And so like windows is probably the biggest one that has been removed from this list, but we find while a lot of time they are old windows that are beneficial to replace, they're not truly in that emergency category of replacement, and they usually take a full year to get the work completed as well.
Yeah, Scott.
Do we have any are we referring those people to CORE? If we get these requests, or in fact, any conversation with anybody about energy efficiency or retrofits, do we have a relationship with CORE? What's our current situation with
Yeah,
them?
we were actually just talking about that with Karen, and we refer people to CORE, and I think CORE refers people to us for this program, so there's kind of a two-way street. When I met with CORE this spring, their focus is really on electrification, and so that's what they care about. We have one grant applicant in right now who's looking at a electrification project, and CORE's really excited about supporting them as sort of a model of this is what we can do in A.P.C.H.A homes to convert your boilers that have just died to some heat pumps. And so that's sort of the big one that we're looking at, but I think a lot of the things like roofs and windows, I'm not sure that CORE is covering those any longer. But we do still refer people that way.
Yeah, they do.
Have we talked with them about becoming a community priority participant?
We are.
We
Yeah,
are.
we
All
are.
A.P.C.H.A residents are.
Mm-hmm.
Can we yell that a little bit louder from the top of the mountain?
Sure. Yeah, I can make a note. Meg was gonna do another communication push about this program, and so we can have her sort of highlight that portion of it.
I mean,
Put that in the newsletter. Is it all A.P.C.H.A or is it? I thought it was just 150 AMI and below.
I
For
thought it
CORE.
was
I thought
all
it
of
was
A.P.C.H.A,
all A.P.C.H.A.
Okay.
but we could also double check that. On the website, it says A.P.C.H.A
A.P.C.H.A
residents.
units, Yeah.
But on that note of CORE, yeah, they have a fairly narrow scope, but I feel like every single time someone's doing a hot water heater or boiler, we're like, also consider reaching out to CORE and seeing about electrification. It doesn't work for everyone, depending how old the building is or what their setup is, but we try.
They do a lot of fuel switching, but they also do energy efficiency stuff. It's a lower threshold. Like I think it's $5,000 match instead of $15,000 match or something like that. But anywhere where we can point money to, I think is what I'm
Yeah.
saying. So, thank you.
I think those boilers too, which sometimes cost $30,000, is a good opportunity for them to reach out to CORE and get as much money help as they can.
Kelly?
Is there, how do we think about this list in comparison to the requirements that we have on our, for the status of the unit at sale? It seems like in the past, we had kind of tried to align those, and then maybe we're not. The proposal here is to not align those, and so would the seller's standards still cover things that are separate from this program completely relative to floors and windows and stuff like that?
I think, Kelly, that's a great question, and it kind of segues into why we're proposing this second grant program to really target those units at turnover and maybe give us a little teeth in the seller standards talk. So if you don't mind, I think we'll address your question more with the second half of the presentation.
Yeah, that's fine. And just help me understand, I'm sorry if I missed the explanation of why you want to narrow the list. Is it to allow it more people to apply into it? Have we been turning people away who want essential repair grants that aren't able to get them?
No, I think it's as Liz said, to truly focus on those essential things, and like those windows which are taking the full year for them to get into their units are feeling less essential. And so by proposing narrowing the scope of the essential repairs program and then having a secondary grant program for units at turnover with a sort of a broader scope, we think that we might be able to touch more units. One thing I didn't mention is we've definitely had and we've allowed for applicants who applied in 2024 to apply to the essential repair grant program again in 2025, as long as it's a completely separate item. And so one thing that we found is that there are quite a few like second applicants. And I think given the strategic goal to improve the whole inventory, this unit turnover program, I think, is sort of aimed in my mind as trying to touch more units at a certain point, if that makes sense. And we can talk about both and what you all see at the end, but this unit turnover program that we're going to propose now does have some similarities, as you said, but the goal here would be to support home buyers who've just won a lottery in those home repairs that they're seeing on those inspection reports, while bringing those A.P.C.H.A homes up to seller standards at that time of turnover. And we think that this would help ensure that items on those inspection reports are being addressed, and that it would bring that inventory up to standard and then have us be able to better enforce seller standards going forward.
I would add to that quickly too, is while owners are required to meet seller standards now, it's just difficult to enforce for a variety of reasons that we've talked about in past board meetings. And one thing being is that buildup of deferred maintenance over time or just aging units. And so the goal here is give them some cash when they buy their unit to make improvements and have that wider scope than the essential repair program. And then that way we can be like, we helped you bring this unit up to a higher standard, and now you're agreeing when you sell this home to do the same.
Peter.
Can you help us with, I don't know if you can do it off the cuff, but like an example of, I'm just going to say somebody goes to sell their unit for $100,000, but their boiler and their windows need to be replaced. Does A.P.C.H.A tell that person you can't sell for $100,000 because you don't meet these standards, so you're going to sell for $90,000, and then isn't the new buyer awarded they buy at $90,000 or they buy at $100,000, and then they have a credit of $10,000 of equity? How does that work in a transaction?
Yeah, so we do award credit for items during that process. My understanding, and maybe Cindy can jump in, is that A.P.C.H.A is just functioning as the transactional broker. So sometimes it's between the buyer and the seller, and sometimes the seller, you know, they just want out and they're happy to take that reduction, and then we can issue credit. I don't know. Do you have
So A.P.C.H.A has no teeth in the transaction, right?
We really kind of don't.
Hope
It's
to.
really hard for us because it's still, that transaction is still between the buyer and the seller because we are not part of the contract. We try our best to have or out of the, and once we get the inspection report, because Pam orders that at the beginning when they just go through and they list it. And once we get that inspection report back, we let them know these are the issues that is probably going to come up from the buyer, and highly recommend that they give them some type of a credit or they take care of it right off the bat. So we try that. It doesn't always work. There's a fine line, and some deed restrictions are so old or a lot older where we have no teeth at all. Mm-hmm. And when I first started working for the Housing Authority, things were sold as is. I mean, people wouldn't even clean their units. They wouldn't fix anything. It was just, they just bought it and then they had to do everything in it. That totally has changed since the early 1990s.
So real quick on this, my concern with this is that takes away a little bit of that, hey, we got your inspection report. Here's 10 critical things that need to be taken care of. Seller knows that maybe they can apply for this program, and they're going to say, pound sand, I'm not doing any of it. You can apply for this turnover grant program and get help to take care of it, right? Mm-hmm. The other question is, you made a comment about improvements. This program isn't about improvements. This is about repairs, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but we were talking about having a more broad scope than just those essential repairs. Like Emily and I are talking about, let's say it's kind of like 30-plus-year-old carpet. Usually that wouldn't apply in this other program, but in this program, yeah, let's get you those new carpets or new flooring. Yeah.
I feel like we'd be better off just to expand the definition, like the 10% capital improvements that people can put on their house. I mean, if we just expanded that definition just to allow things like this to be included, so that if they showed up on the inspection report, you know, the seller could theoretically fix them and then sell the unit and they'd get their money back.
Right.
And then that way there's, to me,
that in this.
That avoids the tax issue for the grant to the recipient. I mean, to me, that just, and it does it without taxpayer dollars. I mean, that seems like a pretty clean way of doing it. It's just by expanding that definition.
And we did expand that definition in this recent reg change to include some more of those things.
Of more like maintenance type. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and if not, what I would just add to that is, let's say you had a seller that you did that, but then the seller doesn't have $10,000 or whatever to fix the needed items. I mean, this grant program, couldn't we give the seller the grant to fix the problems and then reimburse the program at the sale? You know what I'm saying? I mean, in that way, it sort of nets out. I don't know.
This is a perfect example of a split incentive, right? We don't have the incentive because we're not paying the bills. They don't have the incentive because they don't own the place, or they're not going to keep it forever. So I'm going to swing the other direction with this and say any way we can give any money to anyone for any capacity is going to help overall. It seems to me that maybe we could just expand the existing program to include some of this stuff so that it's not creating two different pathways. Mm-hmm. But I love the idea of all of it. Thank you for all your hard work.
I do think that that's a reasonable idea for you all to discuss if we wanted to expand the essential repairs program to include a couple other things. I think we could certainly do that easily. And then we can talk with you about if you think that there needs to be more funds, or this $400,000 that have been allocated the past 2 years is a reasonable amount. I think that this turnover program was us just trying to get a little bit of teeth in the seller standards talk. But I understand the resistance to it as well.
I mean, I wouldn't say I have resistance. I think it's just an economic problem. I mean, I think when we get the capital reserve studies back, then we can start to see what that number looks like. And I think, well, we'll see. I don't know. I mean, when we get those numbers back, adding a zero to the program might not help, right? I mean, I think it's probably going to be a large problem.
And just to give you some type of an idea, you allowed us the right under the 632 fund to purchase a unit at Snyder. And we have done, we got a quote of the work that needs to be done in there. And it's going to be around an additional $35,000.
$27,000
just to let you know.
Quote.
And that's carpeting, that's painting, that's
New hot water
heater,
fixing
things like
some
that
things.
that are in it. Yeah. It wasn't in too bad a shape, but everything was really, really dated. And this is going to bring a lot of that up. We should be able to at least break even on that. That's what our hope is when we go to sell it. So the thing of it is that the housing board has very limited funds for us to do that a lot. Because right now we still have money tied up in the 2 homes at Woody Creek. And but hopefully within the next couple of months that will be taken care of, and those will be
I mean, we should be doing more of that.
Yeah. There are
than
just
going, hey,
yeah.
we're going to sell you this crappy unit, but we'll give you this little 10 grand to go do a couple of things.
And we did think that having, I think it's in here somewhere. Yeah, having sort of a benchmark number when we see those inspection reports, if they're at a certain threshold, and we recommend that $30,000 based off our experience at Snyder Park, of if we're seeing that much happening on the inspection report, maybe that's sort of a flag for A.P.C.H.A to say maybe we want to purchase this one and complete the work like we're doing at Snyder Park.
Peter.
Yes, so just to go back to this example, if somebody is buying a unit for $100,000 and there's $10,000 worth of repairs to be done, A.P.C.H.A the seller still sells the list price on that unit is still $100,000, but the buyer is paying $100,000, but the seller is only receiving $90,000, and then you have that $10,000. Going back to Ward or whoever's idea of the city being a contractor or having a department, can't you just have a contractor take that $10,000 and replace whatever needs to be replaced to bring it up to a standard where you're not having to burden the buyer with doing these repairs and not having the assurance it's up to standard after they've made the repairs? Just kind of like have a team that at turnover brings these units up to standards, and it's just basically taken out of the seller's proceeds.
Peter, that's A.P.C.H.A has no teeth in that transaction.
Yeah.
So somebody puts a unit, 100 grand, Centennial unit, let's use Centennial, for $100,000. They've got all sorts of issues. It's not well repaired, not well taken care of. Go through a lottery system. You got 10 people in the lottery. The first person comes in, we get an inspection. You say, hey, we got these items that need to be taken care of. You should do them. Centennial unit can go, well, my benevolence, I'll take care of it. Or you can say, pound sand, I'll go to the second person. Second person always happens. Second or third person down the line, they buy it. Now they've got a unit that needs some work done. And so they spend their 10 grand or whatever the number is to do it. So the idea behind this program is it helps them do some of that stuff. That's where A.P.C.H.A needs a bigger budget to be able to buy stuff. Same thing, I think I sent an email to you a couple months ago. Somebody was buying a 1971 or 2 non-HUD trailer in Woody Creek. Not really warrantable. You can't get a loan on it. He was able to pay cash for it. But that's one where A.P.C.H.A should buy that unit, jerk that home out, put something in there fresh, prefab, much more modern, much more efficient, much better living conditions, and then put it back on the market and sell it for whatever our costs were, right? So that's where that to me, this is a small item in the bucket to go help somebody buying something that needs a lot of work, but isn't gonna get any help from a seller. The seller doesn't take a discount. They might, and that's where I worry about this program, because sometimes, hey, fix a few things, take care of this, give somebody a credit, it works, because that happens in the real world, doesn't happen in A.P.C.H.A housing, but you take away that power a little bit, but still, somebody's gonna buy that unit and somebody's gonna spend that money.
And there are also
But
different,
not.
there are also different ways to do it. I mean, once, if we get a good inspection report saying it'll take another $10,000 to bring it up, what is possible is that you sell it for $110,000, with the seller realizing they only get $100,000, and that $10,000 goes into some type of an account that can only go for those things to fix. And that way, because the issue is that the buyer is getting the home, but those additional costs, right now, they may not have the money to do that stuff. So if we can get it up front like that and say these funds have got to be used for this, and the only way they're going to be used for this is if you provide us with the receipts or something like that. That's another way to do it, to kind of do that as well. I think what's positive on that end for the buyer is that they can choose the items. If they want to do a different type of, if the countertop is just totally wrecked and they want to do an upgrade of a countertop, we can say, we'll give you this amount for it, but you have to come up with the rest, because you're going one step above. You're getting a granite countertop versus Formica or something like that. So that gives also them the ability to kind of put in their home what they would like to do as well, but still have some money to bring that up to our seller standards.
Real quick, you say there's no teeth, which I trust you, but doesn't every unit have to sell to A.P.C.H.A and then A.P.C.H.A sells it to the new buyer? So A.P.C.H.A can refuse technically to pay the $100,000 and only pay 90 based on the condition? We have a specific buyer for that unit. The main thing that it goes through us and to go through them is one of the things that helps the new buyer is that when it goes through a government entity, the Wheeler real estate transfer tax is exempt. So that buyer doesn't have to pay that. The real estate transfer tax, no matter what, is exempt for any deed restricted property. The Wheeler is not. By going through A.P.C.H.A, it also allows us to basically the right of first refusal to put a new deed restriction on it. And that's how we've always run those. We've never said, well, we're not going to buy it. We're not really the buyer. The contract is not us. The contract itself is between the person who won the lottery and the seller. We are not a party to that contract. There's just a caveat in there that there's going to be a second deed that'll go from the seller to us to the buyer.
Peter, we're a transaction broker representing both buyer and seller.
Okay, last point, then I'll be quiet. I just think, making this equitable with renters, when you go to rent an apartment, you got to put up a security deposit. When you move out, the unit needs to be in a certain condition. I feel like with ownership, it doesn't sound like there's any incentive to maintain your unit when you go to sale.
The other thing I'll add, sort of in tune with what Cindy was suggesting, is one example is, say somebody buys a unit at Centennial and the inspection report calls out that the electric panel is not up to code. This is, I think, pretty common there. And it costs $6,000, say, to replace that electric panel. So this person who's just expended their savings to be able to afford to buy this new A.P.C.H.A home then also has this $6,000. And I think what we'll see is those people are probably going to put that repair off because they've just, acquired this new home. And so part of the thought behind this, giving the buyers this money, is you can complete this repair now, right when you buy the home with this. So that's one other way to think about it.
So bring it up to code.
Mm-hmm.
That would be an excellent use of those funds.
I don't like, why not just, I just don't understand. I mean, why not you just give it to the seller, have the seller do the work, and then the people move into the new house at the higher price and recoup the funds. I mean, you could do way more if you could just sort of continue to roll those funds, and then nobody gets taxed on the grant. I mean, it seems like a much cleaner. I mean,
we try to do that when we get that inspection report back.
Yeah.
We try to tell the seller, do this now. We can add it to your sales price. No, I don't want to do that. I want to just sell it like it is now. So we try that. We try really hard. And there have been one or two people that have said, yes, I'll go ahead and do that. Or they're just, nope, just give them a credit. So they'll close at that, and then the buyer will get that credit for them to do it themselves. So that happens once in a while. It just really depends on the seller themselves.
Is it possible for this program just to say to the seller, we will pay for the repairs, let us do them, and then we just increase the price to the new buyer?
Well,
Just administrative cost on
Yeah.
APSHA.
Right. Well, but then you recoup that money and you can go do another one.
the biggest thing is trying to find somebody to do the work.
Yeah, and
Honestly.
I think that's a really good idea, Carson, and we should look at that.
Yeah.
What we do find is usually people say, they don't come to us and say, I want to sell this in a year and 6 months. They come to us and say, I want to sell right now,
Mm-hmm.
which wouldn't give us the time to do the work. But that's definitely something we should.
I think
be
this is capital. We're getting into the capital reserve discussion, but
Right, again, it sounds like we need more opportunities to kind of take control of this whole stock from every level of it. And the idea of some sort of dedicated workforce
right,
would kind of address this. They'd all have to qualify for APSHA.
right.
So there's
The irony of if we're giving people grants with tax money and then they're paying tax on the tax money, it just seems kind of inefficient.
It's charging your
Sounds like
battery with your
government,
battery's
right?
battery.
Okay, so
No.
I'm going to try to move this forward. Where do you want us from the board tonight?
Well, it sounds like you're not in favor of this second program. So let's go back to the beginning and say, going forward, the continuation of the Essential Repair Grant Program, are you in support of that? And how much should we budget for that program going forward? Knowing that in the past 2 years, we've had $400,000 a year budgeted toward it.
Really quickly, is the board not in support of this new program? Because I didn't get that same vibe. I know that we're questioning it in terms of the system, but
Why is it? I'm not in support of replacing carpet. But what would say somebody closes on a unit and they go, I want to my electrical panel is a mess. It's not up to code. It could start a fire. Can I get a grant to do that? Why can't they do that day after they move in?
They can, and I think that you're right. Like, that could fall under the current Essential Repair Program. But to some point, it's still on them to apply.
a lot of this is in our regulations. The livability standards that we have in the APSHA regulations state that it needs to be in a marketable condition. Electrical systems and appliances need to be operable.
They need to be operable.
Yeah.
Operable.
And-
And,
I used that word on
the
purpose.
appliances need to be working.
Yeah.
And somebody might have a 30 or 40-year-old boiler. It's working.
Mhm.
That we can't say, well, no, I'm sorry, it's too old. You have to replace it. Because it's working. It has to be in working order. And that is what basically it
Just for
states.
another week.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, there's that. It's on the end of life. We have received a few of those Hunter Creek electrical panel requests as well because they bought it and it's not up to code and they would like some help in bringing it up to the current code. It was
To me,
once
I
was
don't
up to a
think
different
we need
code.
to create a new program to do it. I do want to explore Carson's idea and make people aware of it because it sounds like we do it already.
So can we include turnover costs in the existing program? Or would we muddle the water here?
if we start to do
Like
that.
as a bullet point in eligible repairs?
Yeah.
Like,
I think we could. We certainly have grant applicants now who are doing their repairs at turnover.
we just require that they just have bought it.
I would propose that we take the proposed funding for this new program, apply it to the old program, and add a bullet point.
Well, let's clarify turnover costs.
But essential to the A.P.C.H.A program in that we're maintaining the stock by increasing the efficiency of the turnover and solving a little bit of the split incentive. So yeah, we're wordsmithing here with essential.
If for this unit turnover program, what we were thinking would be eligible were mostly things that come up in those inspection reports that happen.
Right.
So maybe that bullet could be like identified items in the inspection report at turnover, something like that.
That's excellent. Are you an attorney?
Livability. Carpet. Yeah. Shag carpet. God.
It makes things maybe easier.
Yeah.
So I think what Emily said though, what would be helpful as budget approaches is hearing, what if this seems like an appropriate amount of funds for this program right now, keeping it the same, increasing it with that added bullet.
Have we bumped up against the level? There's nothing
We've
to
sold
say.
it. We've paid it out every year, right?
Last year we had it fully allocated, but then didn't end up fully.
Well, there's nothing to say 6 months from now, we can't go amend the budget or ask for more. Kelly, sorry.
And I guess I would say, I'm happy to bring this back to the BOCC. I'd like to tailor any change to the program so there is no incentive for the seller to shirk, any kind of negotiating between them and the new buyer for having to make some repairs prior to that sale. Is what my preference would be for that. I continue to wonder why. I think we need to include mobile home parks that are at the very least category capped. There's just different market incentives working in the Woody Creek Mobile Home Park, for example, than like Aspen Village. And I think we should allow for them to apply into this program, is some of my feedback.
And that's open for discussion on the mobile homes. Part of the reason they were omitted from this program is we ran into it with a couple initial Woody Creek applicants who wanted to replace items in their home, and it was really difficult to find anyone willing to work on those homes. So we could still add it to the program, but I think what we had decided that it seems like it's a different issue.
When you say difficult to find, you mean like couldn't find the number or they wouldn't take the bid?
They weren't willing to work on it because of the age of the mobile home, and so they
the contractors were just turning that down as not jobs that they wanted to take.
Because
Age of the home or price of the bid? Is it?
What
What
I saw was the
age of the
the
home.
age of the home because it
Because they're
just wasn't
1967
compatible.
mobile homes,
Okay.
and they wanted to put new windows in it. So it's
Yeah.
putting, and I know that there's a saying for it, and I can't remember what the saying is.
Lipstick on.
Thank you. That's exactly what it is, and that's I think
I think
why
there's
one of the
liability
reasons why
issues.
is does it
Asbestos.
make sense to put a brand new window in a 1967 mobile home?
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So it was difficult, and so we could still look at it, but that's what we ran into with quite a few of those scenarios.
Okay, well, appropriate our budget. Does anybody have thoughts on the budget?
I'll repeat what I said before. I'd like to see the 300,000 proposed roll over into the other 200,000 and end up with a $500,000 budget for an all-inclusive program that helps us improve the housing stock.
I think that I'm okay with that.
That
Thoughts?
works for me.
I mean, I think this is part of I think the essential repairs like turnover, I think is part of a broader discussion on capital reserves.
Would you like to see the percentage of capital improvement gains changed? You mentioned that earlier as a potential trigger point for this.
And the thing with,
Say that again.
The 10% that you can recoup for capital improvements on the house, would you like to see that shift?
No, I don't know that we need to shift that. I think shifting what is eligible for that.
Okay.
To make some of this stuff eligible for that 10%.
Right.
To say, look, if you replace your boiler or, whatever, I mean, I think that's fair. And then if people do that, they do a boiler, they do a roof, they do a furnace. There's depreciation schedules for that. You could depreciate, and that's what we do with the capital improvements, is if you do those, we depreciate, and so then you basically pay for, the amount of that roof that you use. And I think that makes sense.
Again, we did expand that in the recent reg change, so we won't quite have seen the effects of that yet, but it's something that we can, keep an eye on and see if it's increasing the amount of those capital improvement requests or.
And when we do talk about HOA capital reserves, we are also trying to explore those types of solutions as well. So, because I feel like a lot of it has been like some type of program, but also taking a policy crack at it too, and what can help incentivize.
It's going to have to be both. Yeah.
Really quickly, earlier you said you didn't want to include the names of the HOAs because you didn't want it to be a public shaming ceremony. Do you think if we include the names, it will be?
Well, I think off the bat, there were HOAs that just seemed worried about participating in these studies because they were like, what's going to be done with these? Or is it going to be are we going to be talked about in public? And then part of it too is while there are HOAs who aren't taking the proper steps to maintain their capital reserves, there's also market factors that make it difficult to do some property management options. There's HOAs who are even doing a lot of the right things and struggling to maintain a balance over 10 years. And obviously, like when people buy into HOAs, they can look at those capital reserve studies. So it's not like they're confidential, but it was more just I didn't want HOAs to think that we were going to take their name and put it up on the board at the board meeting and with their big red number next to it.
I think I'm with Carson that I'd like to see as granular data as we can get without violating that trust, because I think that is important that we get the good trust and good graces of the HOAs.
I see that as definitely doable. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll wrap it up. I think we're okay at a $500,000 budget.
We'll add a bullet point in mobile homes to the list.
Okay.
Perfect.
I think it's just basically if they're a category 5 or below.
Okay. And I'll add that we'll also, it sounds like, want to communicate with Pitkin County and the city to make if the funding ask is increased for the next year to get that approved and put into A.P.C.H.A.'s budget.
Okay. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is a briefing on community land trusts.
Nice.
CLT.
Karen can get you, if that's the easiest way to do it, she can share, or you can become a co-host.
I'll try to share first.
So you have to join the meeting?
Do you want the instructions?
I think I already am in.
Are you Haley?
Yes.
Perfect.
This is different from city council
Yeah,
chambers.
it's the opposite.
It's the opposite.
Yeah.
Oh, I think this is on.
Good evening. Thanks for having us this evening. I'm Ben Anderson, Community Development Director for the City of Aspen, and sitting next to me is Haley Hart, who's a Senior Long Range Planner in our department. And I think we're here to talk about something I think we're really excited about and is a little bit out of our normal sort of operating procedures and things that we pursue at the city in terms of our regulatory function. We probably in 2019, the idea of a community land trust started to come to my attention in A.P.C.H.A. or in Aspen. I think most of you know that Aspen for a long time has been on the cutting edge of regulations and funding mechanisms in support of affordable housing. We've done a lot in our land use code. You folks have done a lot of work. Past boards have done a lot of work. And I will say that, as I've looked across the landscape of what we've done and what's been effective, a lot of that has, been transformative to this community. But I think we're running out of authority or power within the land use code to go further than what we've done already. And so what are the new opportunities? What are the new tools? And one of the things that a lot of communities have had success with across the country, I think there's more than 300 successful community land trusts in every state of the union. It's a tool that Aspen hasn't tried. I don't think anybody in the Roaring Fork Valley has tried. And it seems, after particularly the study that we've been on in the last several months, it seems like it has a lot of opportunity. So Haley's going to talk and run through the slides. We're happy to stop and talk about any of this. We're happy to sort of, at the end of the discussion, answer any questions that you might have. But one point that I want to emphasize as Haley's going through her slides is the intention for the city of Aspen's role in this is to simply facilitate the process of standing up what would eventually be a fully independent 501c3 nonprofit. And I think that's really important to think about, because I have had lots of conversations in this community with a lot of folks that I think are rightfully skeptical of further government involvement in our affordable housing program. I think some of the topics that you folks were just talking about in terms of stewardship of units are things that we have conversations with pretty regularly with folks. And I think sometimes folks outside of government perhaps have some solutions that are maybe more effective on some of the really sort of wicked problems that we're dealing with within our housing stock. So I'll turn things over to Haley, but please, we intend for this to be a discussion, so please stop us as we're going through if you have any questions.
Yeah. Thanks, Ben. So I'm just going to go over briefly what a CLT is, sort of introduce the concept, and then do an introduction of like what the actual project is and the DOLA grant that the city has secured. And then where we are in the feasibility study. So again, please interrupt if you have any questions as we go through this. So a community land trust, I think like the sort of foundational way to frame this idea is we have a land trust currently in our valley, AVLT, right, that stewards land, puts these conservation sort of overlays on it so that it remains perpetually in that conservation ownership of AVLT, the nonprofit, right? So sort of at the foundation, that is what a community land trust is, but rather than stewarding land and conserving land, it is for the stewardship and conservation of affordable housing, or in this case, could be also for the conservation of affordable commercial spaces. So again, this would be an independent 501c3, and we're sort of working through that process and how the IRS would determine, a nonprofit who has ownership of possible commercial and affordable housing properties in our community, like how that would look and how we would gain that 501c3 status. But all CLTs start as nonprofits. And they typically will start sort of in the affordable housing realm. Sometimes they move into commercial real estate, but out of whatever the 340 that are within the country, they've all been started as affordable housing conveyors for the purpose of preserving home ownership at an affordable rate. So the second point here, donate or purchase land, right? So like AVLT, properties or land or commercial spaces could come in through a series of, different ways. It could be a, tax charitable donation. Somebody could purchase land, convey it to the, CLT, again, for a tax exemption. The CLT itself could use the dollars that they have fundraised or have conveyed from whatever mechanism to purchase land or properties. So there's a lot of flexibility with how the properties can come in. And this is something that the city sees as sort of a gap in what we have currently. We get phone calls, I wouldn't say all the time, but often enough of folks saying, hey, I'm wanting to do something for the community. I want to convey land, or I want to preserve, my parcel and make it affordable in sort of perpetuity. There's not a great mechanism right now for there to sort of have that conveyance of land outside of just sort of the A.P.C.H.A deed restriction, which I think is a really great tool, but it doesn't give, like a tax incentive, or it doesn't give something back to that potential donor. So again, thinking of it as AVLT, right? Like there's sort of a win-win for when a nonprofit is sort of in that space. CLTs operate mostly in sort of like two realms. They can sell and rent the building, or they can they can rent the building, or they can sell it to a qualified owner. And we kind of see it as, this is where A.P.C.H.A really has, a great reputation in the community. They all do a great job of conveying those properties to an interested sort of renter or buyer based on the qualifications. But what is different for a CLT is that there is a ground lease. So the CLT will perpetually own that land underneath whatever the building is. So again, it could be commercial, it could be housing. The CLT can decide if they want it to be rent or for sale, but the CLT will always have sort of a stake in that ownership because there is a ground lease. So it's a little bit different from the deed restriction, right? We're sort of giving, that right for the A.P.C.H.A unit to whomever is the qualified owner. And sometimes that comes with the land, right? Most of our HOAs own the ground underneath the building, whereas a CLT would remain a partner in that conveyance of the property. So for the buyer, only qualifies for a mortgage that covers the cost of the building and the home. So again, because the CLT has ownership of the ground and the dirt underneath, the qualified owner or rentee is not accounting for the land value when they are doing the purchase. And that is how it remains perpetually affordable long-term, right? Because the CLT is in ownership of the land. So any questions, sort of high level? This is just sort of overview of what a CLT is.
Peter.
Yeah, I'm just, first thought is how many opportunities are there for this? Because there's not a lot of undeveloped land that's zoned for residential use. I know Ben asked him about the GMQS in the past, and like we're adding like less than a unit a year or whatever. And so is this more like somebody commits to a community land trust expecting they're going to be able to rezone for more density and affordable housing? Or is this somebody saying, I own a vacant lot and I'd like to put it into a vacant residential lot and put it into a community land trust for somebody to develop an affordable housing home?
Yeah, I think it comes in multiple ways. Like just in the last few months, I've had a conversation with two different people, one of whom was interested in a vacant parcel, one of whom owns a property, and they're just, trying to understand sort of estate planning. One was sort of wanting to look at it through the estate planning lens. The other one was looking at it as more, wanting to give back to the community and looking at this as a possible sort of route to, just give back to Aspen. And I think Ben probably has some examples too. But those are just two examples in the last 3 months that I've talked to individuals about.
Peter, I think it's a really good question, and you and I have definitely talked about this topic previously. The economics of this place, as we all know, are fundamentally different than most communities in terms of that delta between what's happening in the market and what most of our residents who are working here can afford. And that delta, our consultants who have worked in community land trusts all over the country, it's the first thing that I think really became part of their reality as they were trying to understand Aspen, is just that delta and how profound it is. And it obviously changes the model for CLTs or the opportunity for those in Aspen comparative to where this model is a little bit more traditional or conventional in how it's working. We don't have, cheap land on our fringes that we can do a new affordable subdivision that, one of our consultants works out of Bozeman, Montana, and he was able to, talk about a project that he was involved in up there that's under community land trust, and using sort of market rate stuff, the affordability level that they were talking about was, in the neighborhood of $600,000 for a property. And, obviously we're dealing with different numbers down here. And I think these folks that understand this model really well are to be honest, struggling with this dynamic of what the specific opportunities would be here. I think there's consensus though from folks that they've talked with elsewhere. And I think talking with the folks that have volunteered on these kind of working groups that Haley will talk about in just a second, I think it's ultimately creating a mechanism that could be a way to respond to one-off situations. I don't think that a community land trust is going to be the mechanism through which we build the next lumberyard or that we build, a big scale project in Aspen. But right now, I had a conversation with somebody last week who's really struggling with capital gains on their, aging single family home. They're trying to figure out what's in the best interest of their heirs. And, they've talked about redeveloping their property. They've talked about, is there a way for our house to get into the A.P.C.H.A system? And I think to what Haley just said, I think each one of these circumstances is different, but I think if we create the mechanism, it allows us some flexibility. It allows us, and when I say us, the eventual nonprofit, some flexibility that we currently don't have about how to respond to different circumstances that might provide some opportunity both in the affordable housing realm and the commercial realm. So I think it's a fundamental question, Peter. It's definitely on the front of our minds as we're thinking about this. I think we've, as the conversations have gone on within the groups that we've had that, have had some really smart people on it, I think we've tried to get a little too granular in terms of actually how this program would work in Aspen with our economics. And I think that's a little bit ahead of simply creating this foundation that we could create some flexibility and some creativity in.
And I'd like to just add on to, like, we haven't set in stone, like, this is an Aspen only program, right? Like, I think that's the grace of a nonprofit, is that there's flexibility in, like, what the geography is and who could sort of come under this program. So I think at this point, thinking sort of in the larger context, like, it doesn't have to just be within the city limits that this program could serve.
Kelly.
If it's okay, I want to keep my hand up, but I think I will listen to the rest of the presentation to see if maybe they answer my question. So maybe come back to me. Okay. Unless we're at the end of the presentation, and then I'll ask my questions.
You're not.
We're just at the end
I'm
of.
skeptical of this.
Yeah.
I got questions. So
Yeah.
Colorado Cattlemen's Association, they have a land trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
Go out, they do an appraisal of the 3,500 acre cattle ranch in Meeker. They come in at a $6 million value. They put their easement on the property, cuts the value down to $2 million. The rancher, the family, gets paid out $3 million, right? So there's an advantage there. That's always going to be a ranch for perpetuity, right? Mm-hmm. Aspen Valley Land Trust buys property in Carbondale, same kind of thing. Maybe the owner of the property, the family, gets a couple of developable lots, but stays that donut, right? This one, I think the economics, because essentially what but the lumberyard is went out and bought the land, $18 million, 15, 20 years ago. That's a land trust, right? And there's $1 million per unit construction cost to build that. So, I mean, I talk about this as a banker. Buyer only qualifies for a mortgage. I'm not making that loan, right? I mean, it's a leasehold interest. Maybe it's 75% I might make that loan.
Yeah.
Right? But and you're going to pay Aspen construction costs to build the property.
Yeah. I think that there's, again, a variety of ways that this can work out. I will say that, the getting mortgages for these properties for individual owners, there are models for this that are successful all over the country where banks have figured out how to do this. I'm not a banker. I understand sort of the underwriting, structures a little bit. But I do think that in places where these things have been successful, there have been partnerships with local and regional banks to understand this product and come up with the assurances, mechanisms, underwriting requirements that sort of allow this to.
I mean, it's not I'm just saying. I mean, that's not a unique product. It's a leasehold
It's a ground
interest.
lease.
You do them, whatever else, but you still have the hurdle to overcome is the construction cost to build, let's say, a 2,000 square foot house, or maybe it's a multifamily building. You still have to come up with 2,000 a square foot. Aspen construction costs it's $1,000 a foot probably, right? So you're coming
Easy.
up with $2 million
Mhm.
minimum.
Mm-hmm.
So now you got to come up with a quarter of that. So now you're at 500 grand, and maybe there's people out there that can do that.
Mhm.
But that's not to me, that's not the worker bee, or that's not who this board is geared towards.
And it may be here that traditional model of what the CLT does is not engage in that new build construction stuff. It is in existing residences, or it's a sort of reconfiguration of existing residences into, we've got zoning allowances within the city of Aspen across our zone districts. You can have a fourplex by right if it's 100% deed restricted. And so, maybe that conversion cost from a single family into a fourplex is less than sort of new construction from the ground. Again, I don't have any question that the economics of this place change this model a little bit in ways that they don't work elsewhere.
So that's my question. Going back to the discussion, Colorado cattlemen's, is that the benefit to the seller, so to speak? Is do they get a tax benefit from it? Do they get a kicker to walk away and donate their property? It's
the same mechanism, exactly the same mechanism,
okay.
and same
Can I jump in
same
here?
incentives that are to the seller.
Sure, Kelly.
Thanks. And I'll just flag, I don't know how much, I'd be curious how much investigation you guys have done into sort of that tax benefit side. I will share that in some of my conversations on tax policy at the state level, there exists a program for a tax credit for conservation easements, and that is a sellable credit that has its own market. And so that has resulted in the incentive of land conservation. And I have brought up, can we similarly create a program that would incentivize the donation of land for housing, for affordable housing purposes, not simply just for, open space? The Department of Revenue at the state struggles with the conservation easement tax credit program. I think there is some conversation about whether to eliminate that program because of their struggles on how to properly value the land for a state tax credit. Mm-hmm. And so I would sort of flag that as a tangential but important element to this conversation, that perhaps the success of a land trust model for affordable housing may need to push on the need to create that, because right now, a similar program doesn't exist. I don't know. I'm curious what you know about how a 501c3 can treat a donation of land into its program. How do they, what is the mechanism for getting some sort of benefit to the donor? Is something that I'm curious about. It's the obstacles or opportunities there. And then I just would sort of similarly point out that, there are several nonprofits in the Valley that are 501c3s with the purpose of working on affordable housing. that I wonder if one of those can function in this model, or if there's like what distinguishes a community land trust in its 501c3 from, say, a different 501c3 that's working on affordable housing issues, is another question I have. And then thirdly, I don't know if you guys have been talking to the county. I don't actually know what the status is of our conversations at the county level, but last year we had started sort of talking about like an affordable housing trust model and investigating what that could look like. And so I'm curious like how, if you guys have conversed with anyone in our attorney's office for kind of a status update, or in our manager's office, of what those investigations look like. And also, again, how does like an affordable housing trust function differently from a community land trust, and to either give better incentives for our goals?
Yeah. A couple of things. 501c3s sort of related to federal tax code. So we're talking about federal tax incentives that are associated with that. And I will say that CLTs all over the country use this as a primary mechanism to acquire land, acquire real property through either reduced sale, purchase prices, or donations. And so, I think if a state credit for state tax is on top of that, I think it's great. But I will say that doesn't exist in most states. And I think CLTs are effective simply using the federal tax incentives that are there. Towards a couple of your other comments, we have certainly in our conversations been in conversation with April and the Western Regional Housing Authority. We certainly have been in conversation with Ashley Pearl from Pitkin County. Certainly understand their interests and their efforts. I will say that a community land trust is a particular model, and while April's organization is certainly a nonprofit, they've got a different work plan at this point in terms of what they're working on. They're really focused on the Good Deeds program. Could they? Sure, but I think community land trusts typically, as they operate, have a huge stewardship role, that they're working really closely with individual owners, and to be honest with you, intersecting with some of the things that A.P.C.H.A is doing and some of the things that you were just talking about. And so I think there's a lot of different functions for these things. I will just say that it's a pretty effective model that has been bringing affordable housing to communities since, I think, the mid-1970s, sort of across the country. And so, again, there's no illusions that the economics of this place don't raise some questions about how this model can be effective here. I think we've got an established program that's been a huge part of the work of our consultant team, is to kind of understand how Aspen is different from these other places that this model has existed. And it, to be honest with you, there's been skepticism from them. And after a lot of conversation, a lot of investigation, a lot of conversation with folks, they continue to think that there are aspects of this model that bring opportunity here, and things that are currently not being met by other entities in the Roaring Fork Valley or Aspen specifically.
Or does it just become a vehicle to allow people to donate or get some kind of benefit from some land that they've got, that, hey, I want to give back to my community, and it really is no vehicle today to do that, correct?
Yeah. Right. And I'd say, the difference between a CLT and what sort of April is doing, I think that the way that the CLT holds the land and, again, becomes sort of the landowner is different than how the Good Deeds sort of buy down program is working. Yeah. So it's just it's another tool in the tool belt, right? It's a different way to be able to do something that, again, provides that tax incentive that is not currently on the table. Yeah. Okay.
But nothing would prevent one of those organizations to do this as sort of another department of their organization.
That's correct.
Or is there? Okay, that's
yeah.
Okay. And I'll just, I'm you know, I think it's fine. I think in a lot of communities, you see a lot of different housing players filling different roles. So I don't think that this is any different from how that functions in different communities. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
And just to throw in, this might be part of your presentation moving forward, but Kelly, a little background. I met with the community land trust folks a few weeks ago. Part of this is also might relate to commercial spaces, and so that might be coming up. So that helps inform some of the wider conversation here.
Peter, do you have something?
Just curious, how many people have donated their properties or put a deed restriction on their residential properties? Sort of similar to somebody donating land to a land trust. How many people, I know you mentioned because there's not the tax benefit. Has that been the biggest obstacle for, it seems like what might be more common is people donating their property or putting a deed restriction on their property voluntarily and maybe getting housing credits from it and recouping some money through housing credits.
Yeah, I don't know of any that are like altruistically doing it. It's more for the buy down sort of program to get affordable housing credits to sort of put into the redevelopment market.
Yeah. And again, Peter, I would agree with what Haley just said. I can think of a few examples where folks have voluntarily deed restricted with the outcome of, being able to sell their unit to a qualified category sort of owner and pulling the affordable housing credits out of Aspen's program. That's the only mechanism that I know of right now that has had any kind of voluntary deed restrictions placed on it within City of Aspen limits. I'm not going to talk about outside of that, but because I don't know. And so I do not believe that there's currently a mechanism that is set up at this time to facilitate those kinds of circumstances should they arise.
Yeah, and I think that is also because of the affordable housing credits program. Yeah. So I don't think that would occur outside of that. Yeah. So to Christine's point, this is also not just for housing, right? So I'll get into it a little bit more, but we've had 2 working groups. So the thought has been that, this is a mechanism for affordable housing traditionally, but what we're sort of seeing here in Aspen is sort of a sort of decreasing amount of affordable local serving commercial spaces. And CLTs can be very successful in the commercial realm as well, although it is not as a developed program where we do see it happening. So Ben, actually, I think you went and did a tour for the Oak CLT, which is in Oakland, California, and they've got some really great examples of how they have how the CLT has purchased a multi-use building, created affordable commercial in the bottom, and then has done affordable multifamily in the top. So that is where sort of I would say that this is sort of precedent setting for the city of Aspen's feasibility study on this, is that we want the scope to expand outside of just affordable housing and to include an opportunity to have some of like our legacy businesses in town that are local serving sort of continue that service in perpetuity. So think, about our grocery stores and our hardware stores and things that we sort of need as residents of this town to have access to at an affordable rate, for years to come. So, the commercial side of things, I think, has been really exciting just because there hasn't been any CLTs who have sort of created the 501c3 status with both housing and commercial sort of in the front of what that development would look like. So for us, we see this as sort of twofold, right? This is a mechanism, again, that we currently don't have to, create more affordable housing in town or regionally, right? That has yet to be determined. But we also see it as a mechanism to hopefully preserve some of the sort of community assets in our commercial landscape and potentially create incentives around through the land use code.
That's all I'd say.
So we're gonna give Kroger a CLT.
We'll,
we're gonna make
we'll,
them rent
we'll
from
put
us.
anything under a CLT that wants to
We're
come
gonna make
under
them give
it.
us cash flow.
So I just wanted to touch on the city, as y'all know, has the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan. It was last updated in 2024. Within one of the action policy items is this concept of a community land trust. And that really came out of the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, or DOLA. They have a best practices list of affordable housing strategies. And out of this list, I mean, Aspen and Pitkin County, we're really doing all of these already, right? Except for this idea of the land donation, banking, and land trust program. So these are really aligning with where the Affordable Housing Strategic Plan is headed. And because of DOLA's best practice list, we were able to apply for successfully a $135,000 grant. There was a matching component that the city had to bring money forward towards. And with that grant, we have been able to successfully secure, I would say, the top consultant in the country who is doing these community land trust models across the nation. And so through that, we feel that it's sort of, it's furthering the affordable housing goal through the strategic plan. It is also sort of meeting one of the state's interests for the best practices. There's not a ton of other communities in the state who have looked at this. There are 2 examples in the Front Range. And Kelly, to your point, the attorneys that helped start the community land trust in the Front Range, we're working on a contract with them right now, so we can get their sort of expertise on setting up the 501c3 here locally and sort of understanding what the hurdles might be, understanding what the IRS would sort of need from us in order to set that up. But I will say, to reiterate, Ben's point, this is the idea of the community land trust is community led, right? The city was able to sort of secure the grant. We were able to get the consultants on board. But what we have done is create sort of this community working group who really we see as the leads. And I think the city will slowly step back and let sort of the community take hold and see how that develops. And if it does develop, right, we're still in the feasibility process of the grant. So where we are right now is in phase 2, which is program development and business plan outline. Phase 1 was really about the consultants coming to town, meeting with different players in the community, getting an understanding of is this a good idea? And our consultants will say over and over, we didn't hear one person say, no, this is a bad idea. We don't need this. What they have heard is very similar to what the responses in the room have been this evening is, how does it work? How do the economics sort of in our weird little bubble, relate to what is happening on the national scale of CLTs? Does it work? But what they haven't heard is, no, we don't need this. So part of what the phase 1 was sort of collecting that data. Matthew was part of those conversations from the get-go. They also did a sort of study report on other similar type of communities who have looked at the CLT model, and they performed a market evaluation, knowing that we're sort of in this extreme sort of economic development market. Part of the phase 1 as well was forming 2 working groups. So we had one specific to affordable housing, one specific to commercial sort of affordability. And these 2 working groups came up with sort of problem statements and kind of came to some conclusions of how could a CLT work to solve these problems that are not currently being met. So right now we just sort of kicked off the phase 2, which is the program development. That we've created sort of this steering committee, which is a blend of both the affordable housing and affordable commercial working groups. We've had our first meeting, and really what we're looking at now is the who, what, when, where, and how, right? Like, who does it serve? In what geography does it serve? How does it serve? What are sort of the leading traits that we would want to sort of come forward with if a 501c3 were to be developed? So we're sort of right in the beginning phase of that program development and business plan outline. We anticipate that sort of wrapping up in the next 6 to 8 months. And if that steering committee eventually, is saying, all right, this is a good idea, we're ready to move forward, they would then proceed with trying to obtain the 501c3 from the IRS. So again, this is where the city starts to take a step back and let the community lead this development. And I do want to reiterate, like, the part of the CLT that I think is really powerful is that it is community led. So the board has a makeup of both interested parties and those who the CLT is serving. And I think that's really important to just keep reiterating, is that this is not going to be like a city formed nonprofit. We're hopeful that we can have the resources to help develop it if that is what the steering committee desires. But we don't anticipate the city having a string attached to what the 501c3 would be doing as a mission.
Kelly's got a question. Or your hand's still up, Kelly?
No, I just put it back up. Yeah, I guess I'm curious. This is great. Who is on the committee, and what does the city see as its role? Are you guys like planning to sort of seed, the organization with funding, or like, what does that look like?
Yeah, and I think it's a good question.
And I'll also just say I appreciate the sort of more community. I don't know if this quite gets there as far as community facing participation. One of my criticisms of the West Mountain Regional Housing Coalition, which I like and support and everything, but it's just all local governments. It doesn't have, any kind of real meaningful participation from community members on it. And so I think it's going to be limited in, I think, what it can accomplish because of that. So that's just some of my feedback and my hope that the CLT might be starting from a different place.
Yeah, I think with the working groups and even in the sort of makeup of what is now the steering committee that's going to be working on formulating a business plan and coming to some of the answers about the who, what, why, when, how. We identified some experts in the community. Some of those were associated with this organization. Certainly Matthew participated. Chris Everson from the city of Aspen, Ashley Pearls. Obviously, we've got some government representation. We were really just looking for people who understood the sort of housing and commercial scenes in terms of who was participating initially. Out of those, what was a larger list of the two working groups, these are folks that volunteered out of those two working groups to participate. This is not necessarily, if a 501c3 comes out of this is not going to be the board of the 501c3. I think that's kind of a next step. And the typical model in a CLT, I think, as Haley mentioned quickly previously, is you've got folks that are on the board who, there's a board, and then CLTs also have a sort of a membership sort of base, usually of the people who are inhabiting the spaces, either commercially or residentially. But there are community members who don't have a stake or a role or an ownership piece associated with the CLT. And then you also have typically kind of mandated participation on the board of some number of folks that are the inhabitants of the spaces. The intention here, we definitely had some folks that were connected to sort of Upper Valley government. We talked to people sort of up and down the valley in that first phase, both in the private sector and public sector, nonprofit sector. And there are a couple folks still, that we very much are interested in having their expertise as this moves forward, but we've tried to shift away from it being so government heavy at this stage.
And what does the city anticipate relative to seeding the 501c3?
We've just started to do some business planning, some projections out, over 5 years of what the startup costs of this organization is going to be just to run it, to staff it. And, I think that's a conversation. Our initial kind of informal conversations with city council, both previous city council and our kind of current manifestation of our council. And I think there's general support for the idea. We certainly haven't floated numbers. We certainly haven't made any specific requests. I think we need to go a little bit further down the road with this to kind of understand those numbers better. But I think broadly, there's some potential, out of the 150 fund, out of the general fund, in support of potential support of this organization, kind of helping to support it.
Kelly made a point earlier, and then we can wrap up, but can the state create the tax credit to sell? Or is it a federal tax credit? I'm just looking for, let's say, Mark Hunt decides to put half of his buildings into the trust because he has a huge liability, or somebody does. Can the state create the tax credit? Can the federal government involved? Where's that credit come from?
My understanding of how this works, and again, we're just at the very nascent stages of developing a relationship with some tax attorneys in Denver who have worked on these and worked on a CLT in the Front Range that does both commercial and residential, of understanding exactly where those tax incentives come from. The most common model is out of federal tax policy. And it's, exactly the model that AVLT uses, and the one that you just described with the Colorado Cattlemen's Association. Where either it's a donation and the value of that donation of the 501c3 in whole is a tax write-off, or the delta in a reduced sale situation. That is the most common understanding that I have through federal tax policy. I do know that there are some states that have clearly defined credit programs, or also tax abatement incentives, but my understanding is that the most common is the use of the federal tax code.
And I do think something that Lex has brought up almost in every meeting is that local policy and local regulation has a lot of potential to help support and bolster what the outcomes we'd want to see. So I think that's, so we haven't, again, created any sort of ideas of what that could be at this point, but I do think that, again, given our local market and just sort of the economics that we're in, the city and the county may, there's room to sort of support local incentives.
Okay. Any further questions? It's 6:30. I've been texted by a few board members that, hey, John, wrap it up. But any questions from other board members?
I'd like to just make a comment. I love this idea. I think it's the right direction to give more options for donations, or for more pathways for us to pursue affordable housing. So thank you for putting the work together so far. I see a day one day 50 years down the line where you start purchasing our A.P.C.H.A housing and provide some of the labor that we need and provide the teeth that we're talking about missing in our current system. So I think this is a great direction. I'm excited to hear more. Specifically, I'd like to hear more about how this kind of a model might help us with insurability moving forward, because the A.P.C.H.A housing stock is going to get to a place where we're going to need help. And we don't have to have that conversation now, but moving forward in the working groups.
Yeah, we certainly contemplated that as well.
And there's, out of the housing working group, there was one of the things, again, this organization filling gaps in things that don't currently exist. I I think there were a lot of really creative ideas about the role of the CLT in supporting existing HOAs or taking the place of existing HOAs, and maybe providing, because this really is their strength elsewhere, is providing the stewardship of the physical units over time to ensure that, you know, the transition from one owner to the next. I know this is a pretty recent conversation you folks were just having, but I think there's some opportunity there. What that looks like, what that model is, why would the CLT sort of step into that? Like, I do think that there's big questions around that, but I think there's been some really creative ideas around how that might work that have come forward.
Awesome. Yeah. Great. Thank you guys. Appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Very excited.
This is great, Ben and Haley. Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, we have exhausted the agenda for the evening. I will
Motion to
issue
adjourn.
a motion to Carson motions. I'll second. All those in favor of adjourning,
Aye.
signify by saying aye.
Well, yeah.
You got them all.